who are not. Let's talk about the nature of research class. Last time I presented to you the stages of research, which started with the selection of the problem. So I hope by now you have your problem at hand. You have identified now what problem you want to address through your research paper, and that you are in the stage of formulating a good title for that. Okay? Now, after that, we will be identifying the research design, the overall pattern of your research. And that is what we are talking this morning. The nature of research and the classifications of research. And that involves, again, the research design. For you also to identify the research method. So, ang bungad ko kanina, you have to look at the procedure if it is doable or feasible in the school. If we don't have equipment or the machines you need sa school, testings outside are actually permissible as long as accessible lang din yung laboratories where you are going to have your samples tested, and at the same time kaya in terms of budget. Okay? So now let's talk about the nature of research. When you say research, that comes from the French word, searcher, which means to search or to seek. Everybody starts research with research actually, di ba? When you are going to identify the problem, you are doing research. You are doing research, pwedeng desk research using your gadgets there to look at what are the current pressing problem in the community or in the field, your chosen field, like sa medical technology na field. So you are searching and we are seeking solutions to this problem. Okay? And then when you say research, we have the following characteristics. Actually, yung nakasulat dito, ito na yon. Characteristics of research. For research class, we follow series of stages. Yun yung present ko sa inyo last time. And that makes research systematic. We start with, again, identification of the problem. And syempre, end with a hardbound, fully brushed up paper. That's the end of our research. But actually, we also have the responsibility to disseminate the results of our research. Hindi lang yan siya para ilagay sa library and maabog-abugan. Okay? And then, research also is scientific. Therefore, this is based sa principles and methods of science. Especially for experimental research, we are not allowed to make our own procedure. So you really have to research also for the correct procedure on the chosen topic ninyo, for you to gather the correct data also. And then empirical. When you hear the word empirical, that means the data is coming from your own experience, own observation, or your own experimentation. Okay? So, ikaw mismo, first hand, naka-experience, or ikaw mismo yung nag-observe or nag-conduct ng experiment. That's a direct data or empirical. And research is formal. Therefore, we are following a definite format for this, especially the institutional format. I'll be teaching you that. And actually, our institutional format is anchored on the APA format. Okay? And then lastly, critical. Research is critical because this involves precise and accurate judgment or analytical na evaluation of things, of a certain phenomenon or a certain situation. Okay? So, is research beneficial? Tinanong ko to, di ba, yesterday sa Section C, yung mga galing Section C dito na nalipat sa Section A. Tinanong ko ito kahapon, is research beneficial? Actually, Hindi na siya kailangan itanong kasi automatically the answer is yes. All of the things around us are products of research. Our gadgets here are products of research. They they do research and end up discovering something. Okay, so this helps us in our day-to-day living. Now we have the kinds of research class. It can be basic, applied, or empirical. When you say basic research, we just want to understand human behavior. We just want to understand why they act like this, meaning the reason, the underlying principles why acts like this. Therefore, we just want to satisfy our intellectual curiosity. Mag-post ako sa Schoology. Pero maglilipat pa ako ng pangalan sa Schoology, ha? Okay. Na-post ko na ata yung first na PowerPoint presentation. And even the recorded discussions, I have posted that last night. Sige, examples of a basic research. Basic research, we have understanding what motivates people to work hard at their jobs. Example, your chosen research there is like job satisfaction of the medical technologists working in hospitals sa General Santos City. So you want to know if they are satisfied or not, and you can also identify or determine what motivates them to work hard with their jobs, if ever they are satisfied or not satisfied. Another thing, relationship between emotional quotient and leadership skills. We want to know if merong direct relationship, kung tumaas ba yung emotional quotient niya, tataas din ba yung leadership skills, or the other way around. So we just want to know these things. So when you say basic research, we are not trying to really solve a certain problem, but we just want to understand why these things happen, why this phenomenon occurs, or why people act this way. So just like this one, yung leadership skills nila, meron bang relationship yun sa emotional quotient nila? Or influence of stress levels on how often students engage in academic cheating. Okay? So like you want to know, you want to determine why do these students cheat? Meron ba siyang direct relationship also with their stress levels? So hindi natin tinatry i-address yung cheating, but we want to know the underlying reason why they engage, okay, in that activity. So basic research lang yan siya. Pero if our goal is to really solve a particular problem, that is under the applied research. Example, determining the cause of low morale in a given department or organization. So after doing the investigation, at the end of research, the researcher will know the cause of the low morale of these employees or these people in that certain organization, and afterwards you can address that para hindi na sila low morale, okay? And then they can work effectively or efficiently in that organization. Or studies, example, prevention of bullying. So kasali yun siya. Okay? Applied research pa rin yan kasi nga we are trying to solve bullying. We are trying to prevent bullying in school. So again, other examples of applied research, like examples of COVID-19, they are looking for effective vaccines, or they are looking for effective treatment for the virus, the viral infection. That's an applied research. We are trying to solve that problem. Now, empirical researches are actually specific compared to basic research, no? Kasi the data here are empirical. Ano nga sabi ko kanina, empirical are data that is directly obtained through observation mismo ng ating researcher, actual experimentation, or based mismo sa experience of the researcher. So it can be either quanti or quali as long as it's based upon our direct observations, experiences, and experimentation under yan sa empirical research. And we are dealing with population samples here. Like when I say knowledge of the people of General Santos City on COVID-19, the population here are the residents of Gensan. And syempre, we are not going to ask them one by one, but we are going to do sampling. Okay, here. Pero, syempre, direct pa rin yung data natin. So, ginagamit natin ang empirical researches for estimations and hypothesis testing. Okay? So, when you say hypothesis, diba, that is class an educated guess or a tentative solution to a certain problem. Now, since that is tentative, it needs to be tested if tama ba talaga siya or hindi. So, during testing, we are doing direct either observations or experimentations, or directly we administer our survey questionnaire to our chosen samples taken from the population. Okay, so those are the three kinds of research class. So mag-isip-isip na kayo kung ano yung sa concept paper ninyo. Basic lang ba yan? You just want to understand why people act this way? Or you want to really solve a problem, so that's applied research, or most likely that will fall under empirical research, especially if we are going to do experimentation. But how do we classify our research? Kasi kinds of research yun kanina. Ito, classification ng research natin. Pero tapos ko na itong i-discuss sa inyo last time, the quali and the quanti. I hope by now, while you're doing your concept paper, you can easily identify a quali research from a quanti. Sabi ko last time, pag qualitative research, these are the researches that don't have numerical data. Wala tayong numerical data dito. Meaning we are dealing with things that cannot be quantified, impossible to quantify. Like for example, beliefs of example residents in Gensan, we cannot quantify their beliefs. Meanings of things, meanings of like abstract paintings, hindi natin yan siya ma-quantify. Attributes and symbols, and so does experience. We cannot quantify experience also. We cannot assign numerical or numbers there. Okay, so what is the aim of doing a qualitative research? We just want to understand human behavior and the reasons why they are acting like that. Okay, so what are the advantages of doing a qualitative research? We can study more the complex aspects of a person. Okay, hindi kasi lahat malalagyan ng numbers, hindi lahat i-include in a survey questionnaire. And since survey questionnaires most of the time answerable by a Likert scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, mga closed-ended questions yun. Compared ko, you're going to do interview with qualitative research where you will be asking open-ended questions. So you can explore a lot of things from the human, from your human subject or from your participant. And then, syempre, since you are asking open-ended questions, fewer restrictions are also found in qualitative research, or fewer assumptions are placed on the data to be collected. So again, not everything can be quantified. Therefore, those things that cannot be quantified can be studied in more depth if we are going to make a qualitative research. Now, this type of research is also good if we want to explore, especially experiences. If we want to explore the experiences of people in a certain situation, or we want to explore the customs and traditions of an organization or a group of people, this is really a good one. And hypothesis generation. Hindi hypothesis testing ha, hypothesis generation lang. Kasi for example, we know that this problem exists, but we have no idea kung paano natin siya i-address. So pwede tayong magtanong-tanong sa ating mga target participants para may mahanap tayong good hypothesis. Okay? And since this one is done through interview or observation, then the participants can actually answer in their own way, in their own language. Kung mahaba or konti lang yung sasabihan nila, they have the freedom class. If you're going to do qualitative research. Now, what's the disadvantages? What are the disadvantages of doing quali research? Now, since this one is linguistic data, it will be hard for us to validate and know if the answers are reliable or not. So sila yung nagsabi ng answers nila. Hindi natin mababalidate kung they are being truthful or not, or they are just lying with their answers. And then there is more subjectivity involved in analyzing the data. So since this is linguistic data, syempre babasahin mo yun, itatranscribe verbatim, and then after that, babasahin natin, bibigyan natin ng meaning, i-explain natin yung answers nila. Now, the explanation will be more subjective kasi it's how we perceive or understand their answers. So tayo kasi yung nagbibigay ng meaning. So malaki yung chance na magiging subjective tayo when giving meanings to their answers. And then there is data overload. Remember, we are asking here open-ended questions. So kung isang paragraph yung gusto nilang isagot, wala tayong magagawa. Isang paragraph talaga yan. And marami tayong i-analyze. Bibigyan ng meaning ng mga linguistic data. And it will take a long time for us to analyze that class. Syempre, since it will take a long time, this will be time consuming. Okay? If you have questions about qualitative research, you may ask me. You can unmute your microphone or you can send your questions in the chat box. Okay? So again, what are the examples of qualitative research? Example, lived experiences of medical technologists handling, example, COVID-19 patients. So, tatanungin natin, interview natin ngayon, yung may mga direct contact talaga ng mga medical technologists with COVID-19 patients. Okay? Pipiliin natin sila. Kasi I believe hindi naman sila lahat may direct contact. Tama yung iniisip ko kasi sa laboratory, di ba, merong different na area. Okay? So, pwedeng ganun. That's qualitative research. And then, we have quantitative research. Siyempre, from the name itself, quantitative, this is not data-free, meaning we have numerical data here. And since we have numerical data, we will be employing statistics in the analysis and the interpretation. Okay? So quantitative research is good for hypothesis testing. Testing na kanina, generation pa lang. We don't have any idea on how to solve that certain problem. Qualitative research is good for generation of a tentative solution. But this time for quantitative research, we are really doing hypothesis testing. So what are the advantages of making a quantitative research? This allows us to measure and at the same time analyze data. And since we have numerical data and then we employ statistical testings, then there will be more objectivity about the findings of our research. Kasi nag-guide tayo ng protocols and guidelines mismo ng statistics. Okay, hindi tayo magpataka o hatag o conclusion o interpretation of that numerical data. Unlike sa quali na ikaw na yung mag-decide kung how do you find the answers of your participants. So again, sabi ko kanina, we use quantitative research for hypothesis testing. Okay, we are doing experiments to check whether our educated guess or our tentative solution is correct or not. Now, what are the disadvantages of making quantitative research? Most of the time, we don't study things in their natural settings. Example, you're going to test the antibacterial activity of a certain plant material. Syempre, we get the plant material from its natural source. We extract, or we do extraction, and we check in vitro. Most of the time, we are doing in vitro testing for antibacterial activities. So that is not actually a natural setting for the bacteria, for the plant materials. And meron tayong mga studies, example drug discoveries that involve the use of laboratory animals. Okay, so that is not a natural setting also, since the drug example is to be given to human, but we are testing it sa laboratory animals. And we need a large samples coming from the population before we can get accurate results. So it's not just about the experimental studies, but also the descriptive ones, wherein you're going to conduct a survey. So hindi pwedeng mag-conduct ka ng survey for just 5 people. Your results cannot be used for generalization. Hindi yan siya matatawag na accurate. Okay? Questions about the quanti and the quali before we dig deeper to the types of research. Though na-mention ko na ito last time. Let's get to know about them more. Send lang ha if ever meron. Sige. So let's divide the types of research. We have here the first 3 will be under the quantitative research. And then the last 2, ethnographic and phenomenological, are under qualitative research. I hope that is clear. Let's start with descriptive research. Kasi feeling ko marami sa inyong ang magpo-propose, ang nasa concept paper ay descriptive research. So class, descriptive research is a quantitative research. We have numerical data here. But from the name itself, descriptive, we are just trying to describe the characteristic or the behavior or the attributes of that certain group of people or our population. Ngayon lang, bibigay natin yung description nila. That's descriptive research. Example, when you want to find the most frequent disease that affects the children of a town, that's descriptive research. Di-describe lang natin, itong place pala na ito pala yung marami sa kanila. Example, helminths. Ano yung pinakamaraming helminths na nag-i-infest sa mga bata doon sa certain community na yan? Descriptive lang. Description niya yun. Yung mga bata pala dito, ganito. Mataas yung case sa example, pinworm infestation. Enterobius vermicularis. Ganon. What else? Yung mga studies like CAP, knowledge, attitude, and practices of a certain thing or certain issue or phenomenon. Under yan siya sa descriptive kasi at the end of the research, you're going to describe whether they have high knowledge or low knowledge, or how do they practice that certain, example, prevention of dengue. Okay? Check natin ngayon kung mataas ba yung knowledge or yung attitude nila or yung practices nila. Okay? I hope that is clear. What are the advantages of doing descriptive research? If we are going to do observational research, most of the time the people are not aware that we are actually observing them. So they will be, hindi sila magiging conscious, they will act naturally as they do every day. And this is less expensive, especially if magkakandak lang tayo ng survey. Ano lang ba yung gagastusin natin dito? Siyempre, ang papel. Tapos ngayon, nag-shift tayo online. So, most of the time, walang gagastusin kasi nilalagay na sa Google form. And the form is being sent to the target respondent. So, wala masyadong gastos. You're going to do a quantitative descriptive research. We call it quantitative descriptive. So we have to be specific. Okay? And this is not really used to make conclusion, but instead describe lang. And the research starts with it. We give description of the phenomenon or the population, and then the research also ends with a description. So i-describe natin sila at the end of the research. Now, what are the disadvantages of making or pushing with your descriptive research? This requires more skill, especially if you're going to make a questionnaire. Okay? Kasi there are a lot of studies wherein you cannot find questionnaires that can be adapted. Therefore, mapipilitin kayong gumawa ng sariling questionnaire ninyo. Pero syempre, the questionnaire needs to be validated by experts. So in the school, we require at least 3 validators. Kung gagawa kayo ng sarili ninyong questionnaire. And who are these validators? The minimum requirement para sa validators na pipiliin ninyo ay dapat graduate siya ng master's degree. Related to the field, syempre. Okay? So yun ha, hindi pwedeng magpapa-validate lang kahit kanino. Kailangan may master's degree tayo. Ilang validators yun? Minimum of 3 validators. Another question that I always encounter, may bayad magpa-validate. Yes, especially pag hindi nyo kilala yung magba-validate ha, kailangan talagang may compensation yan kasi you are using their time, their effort, and their expertise in validating your questionnaire. Pero kung magkano, yun ang pag-uusapan yun ng validator. Kasi hindi lahat ng validators, wala tayong taripa for that. Hindi parehas ng mga doktor pag magpa-check up ka na itaripa, no? So wala. Depende na yon kung magkano ang sisingilin ng validators ninyo. So hindi yun siya thank you lang ha. Meron talaga yan siyang bayad. So kasali yan siya. Most of the validators sa school, ang hinihingi nila is minimum 300 pesos. Sa school yan. Pero if you can look outside, pero dapat related sa field ha, depende na yun kung magkano yung hihingiin nila. Baka merong hihingi lang ng hindi naman aabot sa 300. So kung tatlo yun, 900 na yung tali nyo yan doon sa budget ninyo if ever you're going to make your own questionnaire. Okay? For descriptive studies, we don't establish cause and effect relationship. So, hindi tayo mag-identify ng cause, bakit nangyayari ang isang bagay. We just want to describe that certain issue or phenomenon. Okay? Response rate is low. I think alam niyo ito. Minsan nakakapagod sumagot sa mga survey. So, minsan kung this is done online, minsan sinisinta lang. Minsan nagre-react naman pero hindi talaga sumasagot. So that is the reason why if you're going to do a survey, you really have to start early for you to gather a lot of respondents. Kasi may magre-refuse talaga yan to answer your questionnaire. And results can change over the period of time. If, for example, this certain issue is being studied dati, the results of their study might not be true nowadays. Example, knowledge on dengue. Kung dati ang result ng previous researcher, mababa yung knowledge ng residents of Jensen sa dengue, hindi ibig sabihin na until now, mababa pa rin. So you might also check that again. If mababa pa rin ba or nag-change na due, for example, sa mga education drive ng iba't ibang organization or even the government. Okay? So yun lang yung disadvantage kasi nagbabago talaga yung description ng isang community, ng group of people about a certain situation. Okay, so that is descriptive research. Descriptive research is different from quali. Quali is done through interview. Most of the time, either direct observation or interview. So you have linguistic data there. And your instrument, your research instrument for qualitative research is syempre interview guide. Pagdating dito sa descriptive, if you're going to do a survey, then your research instrument is questionnaire. Okay? Magkaiba ang questionnaire ha sa interview guide. So, huwag kayong ma-confuse niyan. Experimental research, or from the name itself, we are going to do experiment most of the time inside the laboratory wherein we have controls. We can manipulate one variable, control one variable, and measure the other variable. So when you are going to do an experimental research, this is actually establishing cause and effect relationships. So example, antibacterial activity of a certain plant material. So i-check natin ngayon kung ang cause ba, for example, ng pagkamatay ng bacteria or pag-prevent ng growth nila ay yung plant material mo. Okay? So again, that's establishing cause and effect relationship. However, we have the following disadvantages. Artificiality. So ito yung sabi ko kanina that we are not studying things in their natural setting. We are doing in vitro testings, for example, or we are going to use laboratory animals. And then feasibility. Sabi ko din sa inyo kanina, yung mga magkakandak ng experimental study, please check your procedure if that is feasible. If it is doable in our school, or kung wala tayong equipment or machines sa school, accessible lang ba, example dito sa Jensen or sa Mindanao, yung kailangan ninyo. And at the same time, this is expensive. So you have to evaluate first if kaya nyo ba or hindi. And lastly, unethical. So kahit na class, we are going to, example, use laboratory animals. Remember, animals do have rights also. So we have to really follow ethical consideration. We don't, basta-basta na lang, can I do euthanasia, for example, for our animals? We have to check first if alin doon yung pwedeng euthanize or yung kailangan natin buhayin talaga. Okay? So the simplest experimental design includes two variables. I have discussed this dati sa inyo. We have independent variables and dependent variables. Independent variables, our predictor variables class. So we are going to manipulate them in the study, control natin sila. And while we are controlling them, we are going to measure the outcome. Therefore, the outcome is the dependent variable. And at the same time, for experimental research, we have at least two groups of participants, the control and the experimental. So example, you have a plant material to be tested for its anthelmintic activity para sa mga helmets. So meron tayong grupo ng helmets na i-control, hindi tayo magbibigay ng plant material natin sa kanila. Meron din tayong experimental group. This group of helminths will be exposed to our plant material. So again, we have at least 2 groups. Kasi minsan, syempre, mas maraming groups ito. Merong positive control, like we have another group na ang ibibigay naman natin yung currently established anthelmintic drug sa market. Example, anong example ng anthelmintic na alam nyo? Example, albendazole, mebendazole, yun yung mga examples, no, sa market niyan. So, pwede natin i-subject yung isang grupo. That makes it 3 now. Pero at least, class 2 groups yung pinakamababa for experimental research. Okay? So, idagdag natin sa disadvantage yung malaki yung gastos nito. Especially if you need a lot of chemicals or you need a lot of machines. Pero this will be fulfilling pag mag-experimental research kayo. Okay? Questions? Mata pa mo, basig natulog na mo din, ha? Check na to ni sila, be. Basig natulog na ni sila. Ang uba, natulog na jud ni ba? Oh, wala katingog. Pero ba ni sila ga-open og cam? Shy type mo? Dili jud ta mo mailahan class ko. Dili mo mag-open og cam ba? Gian na jud ta mo sa eskwelahan. Tumiagi na ay nagsigig kaway sa ako, tapos wala pa jud ko nag-antipara. So dili ko makaklaro syempre. Tapos tumiduol na ako. Ako sis naging nagkinsa ganimo. Wala jud ko kaila. Dili jud ko kaila ninyo, dili mo mag-on og cam tabang mga langit. Basig lahiray niyong naong dinha sa inyong picture. Joke lang. Basig lahi ang naong ninyo sa inyong picture sa personal. Hindi ko kaila sa inyo, ha. Except for yung mga nag-open ng cam. Kaila jud ko ninyo lang. Kaning may mga pictures sa ilahang minsan sa tawag ani profile picture ka na kaila ko except kung di jud maklaro, no. Yan, naka-mask pa jud. Bangga na lang taan ni sa eskwelahan wa pa ta nag-ila. Pero padayon basig nagkaon mo din, ha, as long as you are listening. And if during the defense, Dean will ask you what type of research are you conducting, makatubag mo, ha. Kay ginapungutana gyud ni siya sa defense class. Like, mungutana si Dean, what is your research design? Ang answer sa research design, whether your research is quantitative or qualitative, or kung quali siya, you have to identify if that is phenomenological, kung experiences, and kung ethnographic, yung ikakonduct ninyo. And kung ang sagot nyo naman din yung research namin is quantitative, you should be able to identify whether that is descriptive, experimental, or descriptive correlational. Okay? Kailangan alam nyo yan siya. So, okay ra din ha kung nagkaon mo, basta maka-identify types of research. Okay? So, we have correlational research class. From the name itself, correlational, relationship. We are identifying here whether there is a relationship between one variable to another variable. Okay? So whether you conduct an experiment or you do a survey, that will be under a correlational relationship if relationship ang hinahanap natin. Okay? So we are not really looking into cause and effect relationship. Hindi kagaya ng experimental. Relationship lang talaga. Example, hindi pala ako naglagay dito, no? Example, relationship of, yung example kanina, relationship, wala pala akong, mag-type na lang ko class, ha? Wala pala akong, dito, available na pen. Okay. So, ano nga yung correlational study last time? Relationship of knowledge Ayan. Ayan. Relationship of knowledge and yung practices. Actually, yung knowledge, attitude, and practices sa PPE-related waste disposal, ano ang tawag doon? Descriptive correlational. Descriptive siya kasi we're going to describe the knowledge, the practices, the attitude of the respondents sa pag-dispose ng waste. Pero correlational din siya kasi at the end, example, they correlate knowledge and practices. Example, i-check nila kung mataas ba ang knowledge class sa pag-dispose ng waste, mataas din ba ang practices or the other way around. Kasi meron talagang ganyan. Alam nila paano itapon, pero hindi nila ginagawa. So, yun yung chine-check natin. May relationship ba yung knowledge and yung practices? That's a correlational study. Ito. Yeah. That can be a correlational study. You're going to, descriptive correlational siya. Kasi first, you're going to describe the stress level of the students, and you are going to describe also their academic workloads. And then at the end, you are going to get the relationship. Kung direct ba, directly proportional or inversely proportional yung relationship. Which means, kung tumaas ba yung stress, kung tumaas ba yung workload, baliktad. Kung tumaas ba yung workload, tataas din ba yung stress levels nila or the other way around. Okay? So that is actually tama. That is a descriptive correlational study. Ngano, daghan kayo mong ginahimo. Pwedeng ilagay sa title yung word na correlational. Pwede din namang hindi. I-clarify lang natin siya sa part ng research design. Dira, Jud? Okay. So you feel like you are very stressed because of because of the academic workload. Sige. Ano Jud, basta estudyante, no? Alam kay ginabuhat. Basta estudyante, kadaghan kag energy, wa kay kwarta. pag magtrabaho na mo class, wala mo time, kaya magtrabaho na lang mo magtrabaho, wala po mo energy, pero na may kwarta. So mamili tanong, ug asa ta na gusto. Actually, nindot mag-estudyante, kanang tagaan lang kag baon sa imuhang mama and you are not minding the Judith and the Juna. Mga ingana ng mga butang. Nawong na muganti og angkol. Wa pagay ta nagkita sa eskwelahan, nawong na muganti og angkol. Or nagkita na taw lang ko kaila sa inyo. If magkita ta sa school and then I'm not wearing my eyeglass, pakilala mo ha. Kaya di ko makita. Okay? Pita may mag-kiss diri sa akong gadget. I cannot find my eyeglass. Anyway, advantages of doing a correlational study. You can collect much information at the same time ha, parehas atong you can collect the knowledge of the participants, their attitudes and their practices. Marami kang pwedeng makollect if you are going to make a correlational study. Okay? And then you can study a wide range of variables. Syempre nga, marami kang makokollect. Maraming variables dito. And then at the same time, you can check whether they have relationship or not. Okay? And you can study variables that are not easily obtained in the laboratory. Okay? Yung mga hindi magawa during, when you conduct the experiment, you can do a correlational study. But then again, disadvantage, we do not establish cause and effect relationship here. Relationship lang, walang cause and effect. Okay? Hindi natin malalaman kung ang cause ba ng stress nila ay yung academic workload. Pero malalaman natin kung may relationship ba silang dalawa. Ganun ang ibig sabihin ng correlational study. Okay? Pag may relationship, ang tinitingnan yung directly proportional or inversely proportional. Na pag tumaas ang stress, ay pag tumaas ang workload, tataas ba din ba ang stress? Ganon. So yun yung types of quantitative researches natin. So lastly, we'll have the types of qualitative research starting from ethnographic. So sa ethnographic, from the name itself, you go into the community or a certain group of people or an organization, you observe them or you interview them about their customs and tradition. So you have linguistic data also here. Linguistic data lang ha, wala tayong numerical data. Hindi natin maka-quantify ang traditions and customs. Okay, so I know someone who conducted ethnographic research. She actually lived with a certain tribal group here in South Cotabato. So pumunta siyang bukid na part and then tumira talaga siya doon. And then while she was living there, nag-observe siya. Paano sila nagli-live day-to-day na life ng tribal group na yon. Tapos, aside from nag-observe siya, nag-interview din siya. Like mga leaders in that community. Nag-interview siya paano sila nag-diagnose ng sakit, paano din sila naggagamot. Example, may ubo sa kanila, paano nila ginagamot yung ubo. Okay? So that is ethnographic research. And that is the reason why qualitative research is good for hypothesis generation. Kasi for example, itong group ng people na ito, gumagamit sila ng ganitong plant para sa ubo. So ngayon, pag bumaba ka na, punta ka ng city, pwede ka nang magkaroon ng hypothesis ngayon na this plant might actually be a good drug for cough. Nagkaroon ka ngayon ng hypothesis. So, yun yung ibig sabihin ng qualitative research are good for hypothesis generation. And lastly, which is pinakamarami sa school, itong phenomenological research. Pag narinig nyo yan, phenomenological means experiences. Meaning, we are exploring the experiences by a certain group of people sa certain phenomenon din. Okay? They are actually lived by that person. So, hindi ka pwedeng mag-interview nang wala silang experience. Hindi ka pwedeng gumawa ng phenomenological research na walang experience yung in-interview mo over a certain thing. Okay? So, yung marami ngayon, last time, ang phenomenological research was about medical technologists working in the public health sector. So yung in-interview nila, if I'm not mistaken, yung mga medical technologists na nagwo-work sa Department of Health na nade-deploy sa community, yung sa mga health center, ayun yung in-interview nila. So experiences while working in the public health sector. Okay? Masyadong makapal yung paper nila. And when you're going to do qualitative research, the minimum number of persons that you can interview is 8. Okay? So, example, you look for 8 medical technologists and you interview them. 8 yung ating minimum. And yung maximum, depende. Depende if you reach the saturation point. When you say saturation point, example, nag-interview ka na ng 8. Nung gusto mong magdagdag, nag-interview ka ng ika-9, yung answer ng ika-9th class, parehas lang sa answer ng 8. Saturation point na yon. Parehas lang yung answer. Wala ka ng bagong data na nakuha. Wala na siyang bagong answer na na-contribute. So, saturation point. You end there. Okay? Okay. Assessment 2. yeah, if your research is about that, you have the option whether to make your own assessment tool and have it validated by experts, or if you can look for existing assessment tools which you think is suitable in your research, pwede din. Pwede din siyang i-adapt. Okay? So, hanapin niyo muna kung meron. Kung wala kayong choice. Gumawa talaga kayo ng sarili ninyong assessment tool. Okay? Sige. So, these are the research techniques. This is the last slide. Research techniques ito. For qualitative research, you can do interviews. Syempre, one-on-one interview. Or, quali pa rin ito. Focus group discussion. Meaning, the interview comes in group. Okay? Sample, yung 8, isabay-sabay mo sila interview para kayong nagdi-discuss in a group. Pwede din yun siya. Allow din yun siya for a qualitative research. Okay? For quantitative, you can do survey, you can do experimentation. For observation, this can be both quali and quanti, since you can observe and have linguistic data, or you can observe in the laboratory and have numerical data. And then desk research, ito yung ginagawa nyo ngayon, especially if you are going to make your background of the study. Desk research. Ito yung ginagawa talaga natin pag nagre-research tayo for references. Desk research. Okay? So that ends the chapter 2. Do you have questions or clarifications? You can ask me kung okay lang ba yung naiisip niyo na research so far. Pero no duplication tayo ha. I'll be pausing the